Hello Casa community, I'm Chris C. Welcome to another episode of Card Maker, where we use the Boxel framework to build cards that are fully functional application that you can just deploy on the web. Joined by me today is Luke.
Hey, how's it going, Boxel
Luke.
community? Great to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you all. And before the New Year, we recorded 2 episodes. One will focus on a CMS type of use case, creating a landing page about Luke's volleyball career. The second one was building a mortgage calculator that he paid for fully with the funds he earned in his beach volleyball career. Right?
If only.
So today we're gonna work on something that is a little bit more of the type of a litmus test for applications framework, which is, can you build database-driven application that is what people call SaaS, or like application that you can add and remove data from, and formulating tabular data and like doing things with that. So I'll let Luke explain a little bit more, and then we'll look at a mock.
Yeah, I think if you think about the first thing we built, it was pretty static. It's kind of a publishing use case.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that we built was a calculator use case, but there wasn't really a concept of data driving it. More formulas were driving it.
Right.
And so for this one, we wanted to have the idea of kind of a list-based, data-driven, really interactive application. And so we worked with our colleague, Michael, and he put together a little mock for us and said, hey, how can you guys build this? So I wanted to show what Michael came up with.
Yeah, so Michael says, let's do a wedding guest list. So we have a little bit of a application that people will interact with and fill in the data, keep track of things, not just like who they are, but how many guests they have, are they already invited, or any new choices, kind of what the dietary preferences you have. And that gets rolled up into a real list. So you can keep track of these things, and then you can use that as a way to drill down, or in some cases trigger action like emailing those people.
Yeah, excellent. And so, when we asked Michael to do this, Michael doesn't know a lot about Boxel yet. Boxel is brand new. And so what he came up with was not necessarily something that fits directly into Boxel. So we'll see how we adapt it to our operator mode and so forth. But let's jump into it.
Sounds good.
So Chris, I have something pretty special planned for how we're going to tackle this today.
Nice. What is it?
Well, so our colleague Ian is kind of the resident AI genius here at CardStack. And he has been experimenting with a whole bunch of different things, some things we're excited to roll out in the product in the future. But one of the things that is up and running right now is I think we call it a custom GPT.
Yeah.
It's basically, we taught OpenAI about Boxel by giving it a bunch of examples.
Same examples that we've shown.
Yes.
Built.
Yeah.
The same example that's in the draft realms and other places.
And in fact, including the examples from episode 1 and 2.
Really?
Yes.
So
it's in
AI
there.
is completely up to date on this series.
Yes. And so today, what I want to experiment with is, as we build this, is to see if we can use this custom GPT to help us create these cards.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what it looks like. It's called Boxel Helper, and it's available. You have to be a paid customer of OpenAI right now to do this, which I am. And here it is, the helpful assistant for Boxel developers. So let's just tell this AI what we want. So let's see. I'd like to create a guest card definition as the following fields. So what was on there? We had name, we had email, mailing,
Invited,
address.
RSVP, I think meal choices.
Yep.
Mobile phone.
Notes. There should be a Boolean invited field. And an RSVP field that captures whether or not the guest has RSVP'd and the number of people in their party.
So this is just kind of like getting on a call with like a software developer
Yeah.
and say, describing what you need, and just kind of say, hey, I would like a thing that has all these fields that does this.
Exactly. In fact, this is pretty much exactly the thing I would say to another developer on our team if I wanted them to make this card.
Right.
And we'll see. The AIs are a little unpredictable. these days, and sometimes they make stuff up. We call it hallucinating. But they also
Human do too, I think.
That's true. Sometimes you ask somebody for something and they come back with something. You're like, wait, that's what you heard? So we also said that here that the title should return the name, so that the card has a useful name. Let's see, spell chicken correct, and let's see how what it comes up with for this. So I just sent this to Boxel Helper. Boxel Helper is coming back. It says, okay, to create guest card definition with the specified fields, we'll want to define each field with the appropriate data types. We'll want it for RSVP. We'll want to create a custom object to hold those values. Interesting. So it's defining here a RSVP field, and then using that in the other in the guest card definition itself. And I noticed one thing that's not quite right about that. This RSVP field here is extending card def. It really should be extending field def.
Right.
Because anytime you have some data that's going to be contained within your card, you want that to be using field def.
Yeah.
And then another thing I see it hallucinated here is this valid values idea for meal choice. That's not actually a thing in Boxel, at least not yet.
Can be a few things. We've talked about it.
It could be pretty nice.
Yeah.
We do want to come up with a way to try to describe these enumerated fields.
Yes.
This looks pretty good overall. So let's just refine this a little bit,
right,
and say, all right, let's try again. Everything is fine except the RSVP field. It should extend from field def. And let's see if that's enough that it can figure out what to do. Understood. To correctly define the RSVP field in the guest card, it should extend from field def. Let's adjust the implementation. Excellent. Okay. So we see that now it's importing field def, which it wasn't before, which is great. It knows where to get these imports from, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have trouble remembering that sometimes.
Yep. You have to copy and paste and use the copy pasta method.
Right. And so we can see here that RSVP field extends field def. And it has a has responded field as well as a number of people. One's a Boolean field, one's a number field. So that looks all really good. And the rest of it is pretty much as is. So I'll remove that part for meal choice that we said doesn't work. But this is largely, I think, darn good. We're gonna hit this copy button and go back into Boxel. I'm gonna go into code mode, and I'm going to go to new file, create a new card definition. I say that this is my guest card. We'll name the file guest.gts. This should give me a mostly blank file. I'm going to select everything, hit paste, and then I'll just get rid of these valid values, and let's see if it's happy or unhappy about this. Well, let's see. Field is not defined. Okay, good point. So Boxel Helper neglected to import field from card API. So let's add that. Okay, we definitely made some progress here. So we're seeing right now the definition for RSVP field as two subfields. And if I go over here on the left-hand side where in this file, if I click guest card, we now see the implementation for guest. Which is all these fields. So that looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and see if we can create a new instance of one of these cards. So that I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, create a card instance. I'll just create an instance of a general card, and then we'll specialize it. And that does create my JSON in the center and very basic card details on the right. And I'm just going to adjust this to say that we want to use the module guest and the card guest card. And now I have all the fields that we just created here in edit mode. And so we'll go ahead and say, let's say that Chris is going to be invited to this
Thank you for the
wedding.
invitation.
Absolutely. I so hope you have a good time. Put in a basic address here. Basic mobile phone number. Let's say, yes, you're invited. We'll say you haven't responded yet. And there would be 2 people in your party. Meal choice, let's say chicken. And let's take a look at the isolated view. Okay, there's some basic information here. We're also seeing that the RSVP field is giving us this missing embedded component for field def field. And this is indeed, there's 2 problems I see with this. One is it doesn't know that this should be named RSVP field. And the second is that we are missing a component. So I'm going to go ahead and address that first. So we'll go to our guest.gts file. And here in RSVP field, the reason it doesn't know what this should be called is because we didn't give it a static display name like we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. I'm going to call this RSVP. And now if I focus my cursor down here, we can now see that the RSVP field here shows up as RSVP. So we know that that's now being picked up. And it's pretty cool how quickly the system understands it as you change this code. It's
Yeah, the code and the visualization is not just a visualization, it's actually binding together.
Yeah.
So whatever changes we make in the UI by point and click is the same thing as doing the code. Underlying this model is a code model. So it's actually not correct to call this a no-code system, so even though it has elements of no-code manipulation with point and click. Underlying this entire system is just TypeScript.
Yep, indeed. So then the second thing we want to do here for this embedded mode, for the embedded format for RSVP field, is to define it. And to do that, I'm going to create a static embedded equals, and so we're going to say that this is class embedded, extends component, type of this, and then inside of these curlies, we're going to define our embedded template. So we'll say, did you RSVP? And for that one, we'll delegate to the what do we call has responded field. And then the second thing, put a break there. The second part of it is how many people are attending.
Like the +1 or total number of parties, right?
Exactly. So this would be at fields dot number of people. So now if we go back to that view, see if it's okay with this embedded. Whoops, I missed the closing angle bracket there. So now if we go back to this view, we should see we no longer have that error message here for the RSVP. Instead, we see the embedded view of that card, which is pretty cool. And the next thing that we want to do is to just kind of spruce this up a little bit, because if you remember, Michael's mock looked a bit nicer than this kind of standard UI. And for that, I've got some HTML and CSS that I'm going to use to drop into that template. This is going to be a template for the guest card. And we'll define it right above, and then I'm going to reference it below. So here what I'm doing is I'm defining a view. Do this inside of this definition, I think. And then we'll say static isolated equals view, and static edit equals view. So what I'm telling the system here is that I want to use this new thing that I just pasted in for both the isolated view and the edit view. looks like I do want to put this outside after all. And I'll take you through this template briefly so we can just see what's in it. So what we're saying here is we've got this template. We have container. There's an H1 with a name field. So in this case, Chris C, right? Put your name in there. And then there's a fields div, a horizontal rule, and then a fields div. And then we're using this field container component that comes from Boxel UI. It's the same thing that our default templates use, but it has a nice label. It puts the field inputs in the right place, or the field, or the rendering of the field of the data in the right place. The label can be customized here easily if you wish. And so it's really nice to be able to go from the standard template and give you something that's close to that by using field container, but lets you do some customization, such as the H1 at the top. We have a little decorative image that we'll see that I added here at the bottom as well. And then our CSS, of course, to just spruce it up a little bit. So
you're basically retaining the structural system that we recommend for making Boxel UI while having visual control over it. Versus saying, I'm just making a custom template and Boxel doesn't know everything. We actually know the boundaries of the fields.
Yes, totally. And we're able to leverage all of the excellent work that members of the team here have done to get the details of that rendering correct. And so in order to have this work, we're going to need to import this component. So I said it was called field container. And we get this from our CardStack Boxel UI package. And in the components. But here we've got a nice looking template here with all of the key fields that we added, along with some nice little wedding-y decorative stuff. And
dingbats.
Your name right there at the front. Somehow I managed to put C in the email field instead of your name field. Let's just go ahead and fix that. I think I assumed that, say ct@gmail.com, not actually Chris's email address. FYI.
It'd be nice to have a two-letter Gmail address. That'd be pretty hot.
Touch. Cool. So now we see your full name at the top. So that's kind of the beginning of this system, right? Is the detail view. And honestly, this is not really any different than what we built in the previous episodes so far.
Yeah.
The real thing that's going to get interesting here is building a list view for this. Now, having a list of one item is not that interesting. So I think we should go ahead and create at least one more item, one more guest here.
Sure.
And then once we have two guests, we'll try to create a list that we can add those to.
Makes sense.
So we're going to use the same approach to create a new card instance. And we're going to say that the module is our guest module, and the card is called a guest card. That's going to give us our edit field. So notice that the edit template also has a nice new look to it. And that's because we used that same template for both the isolated and edit view.
The only difference is that the fields that are editable, the text box itself is turned on to be edited.
Exactly. And we didn't have to tell it anything special in order to get that to work, which is pretty cool. We just said, hey, there's a field container here, and then your field goes here. So let's see. I was invited also. Let's say that I have RSVP, just so we have a little different states here. I'm going to go with the vegetarian meal choice. Pretend I'm lm@gmail. Skip that field for now. Okay, all good. So isolated view, great. I'm in there as well now. So now what we want to do is we want to create another card that's going to be our list card, and it's going to reference this one. And what I'd like to try doing, if it's okay with you, Chris, is to see if we can get the AI to help us with this part too.
Sure.
This is, I think, conceptually harder, although the code may end up being simpler. But the idea, like, how do you kind of aggregate this stuff, I think is an interesting question. What I'm going to do here is we're going to say, tell it, given the above guest.gts implementation, because Boxel helper has context, right, to our conversation. It knows
they already know what fields and what you're trying to do, yeah.
Yep. please write me a guest list.gts that defines a card using links to many. And what links to many is a Boxel concept describing a relationship between cards where one card can have a pointer to multiple other cards. And that's kind of how we'll model this list. And we'll say that this lists guest details in a tabular format.
Table.
I don't know if have we talked about the atom format yet in this series?
I don't think so. I think we introduced it when we talked about the different types of format within the kind of
but
preview.
we haven't really used it yet. Yeah. So we've talked about isolated, edited, we've talked about embedded. We made actually all three of those today already. But the atom format is a really interesting one because what it's designed, its purpose in Boxel is when you need to represent a card in a very small amount of area, like a spreadsheet field or a table field like we do right now, that's what the atom format is for. So I just want to tell this our AI to say, hey, please be sure to use Boxel's atom format to display each field value in each row. All right, let's see what it can do. Okay, to create a guest list card that lists guest details in a tabular format, uses the links to many relationship. It's really very good at replaying back to you what you've asked it. You'll need to define a card that references the guest card. Within this, you'll structure the data in a tabular format using Boxel's atom components for displaying each field value. Okay, here's the implementation. And now it's writing some TypeScript for us. So we're importing the guest card. Cool. We have our guest list card. Has a field, guests, links to many, guest card. So far, so good. And the isolated view, it's actually making the template for us, which is interesting because it didn't do that for us the last card we asked it to create.
It was more like generating the schema, right?
Yeah. But in this case, we told it we want a tabular format. And so the only way to do that is with a custom template. And now we're getting to the HTML portion of the template. Here we've got our row header. And now we have tbody. And now here's the kind of key part of this. At pound each at model.guests as guest, TD, and it's outputting each field value here. And it's even so smart, being smart too, when it's got a Boolean field here. It's saying if guest.invited, print out yes, otherwise print out no. So that's pretty interesting. Otherwise, we would probably have a true or false, which maybe is not.
It's more friendly, more human language to do yes, no.
Yeah. But the one thing that it did not do that I'm a little disappointed at is, if you remember, I asked it to use the atom format. And in order to use the atom format, you have to output fields, right? And so here we're outputting these curly brace. This is what we call outputting the model. The difference between outputting
it's
data
kind of taking the
components.
data in not actually using the preview UI.
Yes, exactly. So let's tell it, let's see if we can give it a little bit more instruction and have it refine this for us. So I'm going to say, please loop over at fields.guests instead and render fields for each as in, and I'll just give it a little example, be like guest field dot field name goes here, at format equals atom. And I'm gonna, let's see if it can understand me, because it's interesting, because what I just typed is pseudocode, not actually anything that would run anywhere by itself. But it's enough. If I was explaining this to a junior programmer, it would be enough. And so let's see if it's enough for the AI. Okay, we're outputting the CSS again. Here we go into the HTML. We got our row header. Here's the moment of truth coming. Body at a pound each, fields.guests as guest field, bingo. Angle bracket guest field.name, format equals atom in each cell as appropriate. And now it's interesting, if you look at this, we don't need to do the conditional yes, no, because we're going to output the field directly, and the field can have its own logic about how does it get output.
That's kind of inside the wrapper, the totals all the way down
Yes,
kind of thing.
exactly. Yep. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and grab this code, pop back to Boxel, create a new card definition. We're going to call this guest list and guest list GTS, create. Going to select everything, hit paste, and we'll see, okay, not quite happy. Let's see, line 39. That's 39 of the template, which is actually not 39. And yet it looks like it got a little confused when it came to the RSVP field. All of these other ones are angle bracket references, but here it's a little confused. So what we really want this to be is angle bracket guest field.rsvp format Atom. That's it. And then the RSVP field itself should know how to represent itself in an Atom format. It probably doesn't yet. We're going to have to tell it, but that's the concept here. So, okay, let's see. Encountered an error while evaluating. Yes, so this name of this file here is guest, not guest card. And yeah, if I had looked at the comment, it would say, assuming guest card is in the same directory. Well, right, it didn't know. And this is one of the cool things that when we take this AI concept and instead of it being in a separate tab in my browser running on OpenAI's website, but if we can pull this into the Boxel UI and give it awareness of the file tree and everything, then those kinds of assumptions it won't need to guess at. It's going to be able to see it and know. It's going to be really, really awesome.
Yep. The feedback loop requires less human copy and pasting and switching.
Exactly.
But these error messages, if you think about code interpreter within ChatGPT, it takes the error message and try again.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. Like even in the official product from OpenAI, these type of try and error for generated code is part of the workflow. We're just kind of facilitating between two browser tabs right now.
Totally. And speaking of error messages, I do want to just point out and say really big thanks to my colleague Matitz that we now actually have syntax errors here, which really we didn't the first 2 episodes, and it makes it really hard to find out what's going on with your code. So thank you, Matitz. Cool. So as long as the schema editor renders correctly, then I know that I don't have any syntax errors, which is great. And so now I've got my guest list card, which in theory has the ability to have guests on it. So let's go ahead and see if we can create an instance of this. I'm going to push my luck and try the create instance version again first. We have here our guest list edit UI, and I have an add guests option. So I'm going to go ahead and click add guests. Boom. So now we have our name showing here. It makes it much easier to select cards to add to this links to relationship.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and choose you. Hit go. We now have Chris C listed here, and I'll go ahead and add myself as well. So we now have 2 guests listed. And if I flip back to isolated view, we can see that this tabular view that the AI made for us is now starting to be populated with people, me and you. So pretty neat stuff here. So this is a little much to show on the this tabular view. We don't really need to see all this information here. And in Michael's mock, there was some fewer fields. So I'm going to trim it down, and then we're going to focus on making the fields that we do have show up properly.
Right.
So let's go back to our guest list, and we're going to keep name. That's important. We're going to keep invited. We'll keep the RSVP'd, and we'll keep email. The rest of them don't need to be in this particular view. So let's see. Email is going to be in the last spot. Then we have RSVP, invited, and we'll drop these others out. Give this a better label. And then let's go back, check out our card. Give it a second. Yep, there we go. Okay, cool. So now we have 4 fields, much more manageable. So I noticed a couple of things here. One is this is not very attractive yet. certainly doesn't look as good as the mock that Michael made for us. The second is the RSVP'd field is empty. The reason that it's empty is because we're showing the atom format, and while regular strings and booleans have a built-in atom format that you get for free from Boxel, when you develop your own custom field def, it's up to you to define the
Right.
So let's go ahead and define that atom format first as the next step.
Generally speaking, if you want your own features and you want to extend fields, you own the problem, but only once. Once you make it, you can use that atom format 100 times.
Absolutely. And when we in the ecosystem that we imagine developing, where there's third-party developers able to create fields and there's lots of sharing of these things around the community, that stuff will be taken care of for you as well. So we're going to go back to our guest.gts card, scroll up to our RSVP field here. We can see we've already developed a embedded format here. So we're going to also now create a atom format. Class atom extends component type of this. Inside of here, we'll have a template. And let's see. So we want to say, we want this to look a few different ways, depending on what the state of your RSVP is. So we'll first say, let's see, if at model dot has responded, and let's specifically say if this is true, because if I haven't filled out this field yet, I don't want to consider it true or false necessarily yet. So this will be one state. And in this state, basically, I want to say something like yes and the number of people. And then we'll say, whoops, looks like I managed to break the operator mode temporarily. One too many curly braces, perhaps. So else, I want to handle the case where has responded has been set to false. And then finally, there's the case where I don't have a has responded value at all yet. So in this case, I want to say something like no. And in this case, I want to say something like not yet. And then I want to style these things, reasonably nicely, so that when it shows up in the table, it's easy to kind of scan and stuff. So what I'll do here is inside of here, we'll create a span. That's a HTML element. And we'll give it a CSS class so we can style it. We'll say that this is attending, and say yes. And then I will say the the model dot number of people. So it would be yes, comma 5, right, or 4, however many people are in their party. And then we'll close our span. And as you do this, you can notice we're getting real-time feedback about syntax errors in this right-hand panel, which is pretty neat.
When it doesn't have syntax error, then we can display the field editor. If we don't, we should tell you why we can't.
Exactly.
Yeah. No need to flip in panel. We just put it in the same place.
Yep. And we'll probably do the same thing. One day we plan to have this kind of playground where you can see an example of your card updating in real time. We'll do the same thing there, where we'll give you that syntax error right away if we know that it's available to you. So we've got a no in this case, and then in our not yet case, we'll say this is the class is waiting. And then I've got some useful style tag we can grab to just give it a little color. So this EQ is something that we need to import in order to use. So I'm going to just go ahead and grab that from Boxel UI helpers. There it is, typo, omdol instead of model. So the reason that that's not a syntax error is because in our templating language at anything is valid. It's not necessarily wrong because things may be nullable. But in this case, at model is what we want. So if I now come back here to the embedded view, now this is reflected properly.
Instead of defaulting to a false or true.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. If I now go to guest list card, so we can see now that our new atom format, fixed atom format, is being reflected here in the RSVP column.
With color coding and the kind of scannability.
Yeah, so it's really nice. So there's we could do one of two things next, Chris. I'll let you choose the direction. We could make this list look a lot nicer, kind of bring it closer to Michael's mock, or we could introduce the ability to click on one of these rows to open the details of that person.
I think if you want a database application with master detail, this is, I think getting that navigational aid is key, right?
I think
because
so.
what we're getting into when you're getting guest lists is you're not just talking about card that contains a cell, you're actually using the underlying draft realm, the places almost like a file folder you share things, and using what's in there, like a database query on the guests that you have added to your realm as a way to respond to these things. So they're like cards that work with each other, not contain each other.
Exactly. Like there's a relationship between the list and the guest.
So it'd be good to see how the fact that those things are separate, like the guest list cards a separate card as the guest cards. There's 2 that can be 100.
Yeah.
But there's a way for them to tie together and make it navigationally feel like it's one app.
Yes. So in order to do that, we're going to look at the interact mode, which we haven't spent a lot of time with yet in the Card Maker episodes. But this is the mode in which we're able to kind of navigate in the way that we plan to between these.
We can make it bigger by hiding the developer plan.
Thanks. Good point. We don't need to see that. So I need to look through here and see our new card. We have some work in progress to improve the ordering of this list. So let's just find our guest list card. Here it is. So if we're looking at a guest list, what we want to be able to do is I want to be able to click on one of these rows and have it open that other card that we just saw, kind of in this stack. We can see that there's a little stack here, right? Draft workspace, now guest list. We want me or you to open its own card on top of that. So that's our goal. So in order to do that, we're going to come back into code mode. And we're going to go to our guest list GTS here. And we're going to enable a click on this row to do something special. So the way that the language that we use to do that is, again, with curly braces, and we use what's called a modifier. And that the specific one we're going to use is called on, which lets us wire something up to an event. And we're going to say on click, we're going to do something. And what we're going to do is run a method of our card called open guest card. And then which one do we want to open? Well, we want to open a particular index. And you may be confused about why we need to do this kind of funny language of saying, like, get me the first or second, whichever number row we click in here. Because what we're working with here is fields primarily. We don't have easy access to the card model, and the card model is what we expect to pass to this function to be able to open it. So I think there might be some opportunities to improve our API here, but for now, this is a way to do it, is to say, okay, you clicked on the first row, we're going to give you open up the card for the first guest. Right. So now we are referencing this open guest card method, but of course it doesn't exist yet. So we're going to need to create that. And we're going to do that in our guest list card. I'm going to say, we're going to call this an action. I'm going to say this is open guest card. I'm going to have the guest passed in. And we have what we call a context object that's available to this card. It's available at this.args.context. Now, what you have available in code mode is different than what you have available in interact mode. In interact mode is where we have this view card action available to us, but I don't want it to crash or blow up in code mode. So we're going to first check to see if this action is available. And if it is, we're going to invoke it. Say this.arg.context.actions.viewCard, and we're going to pass it our card instance. And then if we don't have it available, we'll just log maybe a warning to the console saying on detail card opening functionality is not available here. Okay. So and then the last thing I want to do is just tweak our styles so that we get a nice pointer cursor over this row.
Because it's now essentially acting as a button.
Exactly, it's clickable. Yeah. So if you recall, our styles are all well scoped. So I can just say, hey, if it's a table row, make it a pointer. And I don't have to worry about giving it a particular name because there's only one kind of table row in this card. So we'll need to give it a couple of imports. We'll import action from @Ember object, and we'll also import on from @Ember modifier. Spell import correctly. So here I define this action in the card, but really it should be defined as part of the component for the format. So context, I see action versus actions. This plural stuff is really getting me today, Chris.
Yeah, I know. It's good to get a language server in there so we can get rid of these things.
Yeah, indeed. I also need to import that FN function here in order to have it work. So I'm going to say this comes from Ember helpers. Ember helper, I think. Let's see. Back to interact mode. Click and boom.
Nice.
We've got a stackable master detail list. That's pretty cool here. So now we can see all of our linked cards at a glance, but then we can click in and we can go into and see all the details about any of them.
Can you change?
We can go into edit mode. Yep, we can change, let's say, the number of people.
I'm bringing 10 people.
Oh, yeah, and you've RSVP too.
Yeah.
So you bring 10 in RSVP. And if I save that and close this, we now see this update in real time. Yes, 10. Now, there are some aspects of this kind of dependency cache invalidation that are still in progress in the platform, and that's some stuff that's coming up on our roadmap pretty soon right now about that. But this particular case works really nicely. And so the big thing that I think is missing here is the ability to now add a new card.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably the last thing that we should do on this, and then we can kind of consider it a good example of a basic database.
Yeah, there's also always a new button, right? Like new guests, new deal.
Right, because if we only had just me and you available here, and in order to create new ones, we had to go through
code mode, new instance.
That would not be too usable. So it'd be nice if up here, just like in Michael's mock, there was a add guest button.
That's a call to action, right? Like a button that asks you to click on it and then something expected happen for a database-driven application.
Exactly. So back to code mode we go. Back to our guest list.gts card. Over to our template for the header, and above our table, we're going to make a header element. And inside the header element, we'll say we've got a button, and it's got a on click. And here what we want to do is to say this dot create guest. And the name of the text on the button will be,
I think add guests.
there you go, add guest works lovely. This card, just add guest, close the button, element, and let's take a quick look just for a visual before because we obviously have to write the create guest function still. But let's just take a look. Okay, well, there is a button there. It's not the most attractive, but we have we talked about Boxel UI before, where you can get useful components. Boxel UI has a button available built in. And so since we can import it pretty easily, let's just go ahead and grab that and use it. Do that quickly. Call this Boxel button, or import Boxel button, I should say, from cardstack/Boxel UI components. And everything works the same. We just can replace the word button there with our Boxel button and add in the word from, forgot. And we should be able to see now it's a more attractive, more voxely button here. And we'll use some CSS to kind of move that around and so forth. But for now, this is looking good. So the next step is to write the function that's actually going to help us create a new card. And to do that, we're going to have another add action here in our isolated template. It's going to be called create guest, the function. And I've got some code that I'm going to grab to drop in here, and then we'll talk through it together. It's a little bit much to type here in real time. And I'll also grab some improved styling here. Okay, come back here. So our create guest function is going to look like this. We're going to say if our create card action is available in our current context. So just like we talked about the view card was not available everywhere, like in code mode, for example.
Yeah, when you're in code mode, you don't have that card stacking UI to go and drill down.
Exactly. Right? So if we're in a context where we have create card, as we will in interact mode, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the realm URL. We're going to then create a card ref. And a card ref is required to create a new card in Boxel. And it's going to be a pointer to the module and the name of the class that's defined inside of that module. So in this case, it's the guest.gts module, and the name of the card is guest card. So we're going to create an instance of new card, and it's going to call this create card action. This is an asynchronous action, which means we want to use await to await the result of it. And in order for that to work, I had to add async up here, which I did just as we were starting to type here. Once we do this, we're going to eventually have a new guest. And the reason that this is async is because it's actually going to open on screen this new card. It's going to wait for us to put in some information and save it. Then it's going to continue to run this code. So once we have our new guest, we're going to merge it with our guest module. That's what this fancy little TypeScript, JavaScript syntax does. And then we're going to update our guests, the value of our guest property with that new list. So just going to add the new guest to the bottom of the list and add it. So in order to get the realm URL from our card, we need to pass a particular symbol in order to get it. And that symbol here is called realm URL, and we fetch it from the card API module in CardStack. And I think, Chris, this is another example of a Boxel API that's probably a little bit more low level than we would like. We'd like to probably polish this and make this a little bit easier to use.
It's very typical to kind of do the add new, but what we're really doing here is going through the steps that you manually have to go through, which is first find what you're trying to make it, like let's say create a new guest, like Sam or something, add Sam, and then like add Sam as a relationship, and then refresh the page, essentially. But that can be an API that's just an add.
Yes, exactly. We can make this easier to use. But for now, let's see how we're doing. So if I click add guest, wow, okay, awesome. So now I immediately have this blank new guest. And let's say that this is going to be Sam S. And we'll say, yes, of course, we're inviting Sam. He has not responded yet. He'll be 2 people. He'll probably want the steak, and we'll leave the rest blank for now. We'll finish editing, close this, and immediately we see Sam S on the list.
Right.
So pretty cool. I'm going to drop in. I had some updated styles drop in to just snazz it up a little bit. And so let me drop those into our guest list. See if that is enough or not. Look at the preview here. Ah, yeah, that's more like it.
Yep, that's
So,
more like
back
that looks
over to
legit.
interact mode. So now we have something that starts to look quite attractive. And despite working through some challenges here, we were able to, not too much time, create what a lot of people will pay a SaaS subscription for in order to achieve. So lots more that we can do on this.
Sure.
But I think it's a good start, and it illustrates some of our key concepts. So maybe just to recap, the key things that we touched on is the relationship between cards, the links to many. We touched on actions and being able to open new cards inside of our interact mode, or open those cards through the relationship and add new cards.
Right.
We looked at the Atom format, which is new for us. And we made something that looks pretty good.
And the call to action, the idea of orchestrating in operator mode, various types of UI pattern that people come to expect, drill down, having a pop-up dialog box that allows you to enter, having going back breadcrumbed. Obviously, with card stacking in operator mode, you don't need a lot of extra UI. But if you want to put this in where you want to have your list always on the left, and you could go build those interfaces as well, and you just be doing it slightly differently. Instead of saying, please open a new window, you would say, let's render into this place the field, the embedded view, or even isolated
That's
view.
a great point, Chris. So we talked about links to many, and we have these cards as being kind of very separate.
Yeah.
But if you have a linked card, you can still render it in your own template if you wanted to. It's maybe in a future episode we should show that.
Exactly. And how you orchestrate depends on how much you want to take ownership as a card developer of guest list of the guest. You might just say, I don't want to care about that. Just pop on a new window and deal with that later on, or stack the card within this view, this page, and have Boxel operator mode deal with the window management. Or you can go really deep in and just say, I just want his data. I'm going to render certain things. So these are all ways that you can decide when do you want to stop your customization and when do you want to delegate to either the overall Boxel UI component or the field maker's intent.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, fun stuff.
Yeah, I one thing I wanted to show is that if you can go back to draft form, can we see what we've created so far in this series? Just go and look at the not in code mode, maybe in
the inspector.
mode.
Sure, absolutely.
So when we finish one of these episodes, we actually put the cards that we create in the GitHub repository, which adds to the catalog cards that's available in this draft realm, which is loaded from the GitHub repository. As we mentioned earlier, the AI is actually being trained on these cards? What are the conventions? So every single time we do something correctly or we use the right imports, if we ask Boxel helper in the future, it will know how to do that right the first time.
Yes.
Because as you know, AI is like a junior developer or a kid. The more examples you show, the more you can tell them, the more they learn. And that's what we're doing right now. We're using kind of AI as a side to make sure that AI can help us understand what's going on. But we want to get in a situation where we have to give less and less instruction and have the AI and say, hey, AI, make me a mortgage calculator with these fields, and it will just generate this right the first time. And if you think about what is going on is that we're copying, pasting the AI output into code mode, but if we put the AI panel, which we're integrating into the application, in fact, some community member has noticed that we have AI features in our GitHub activity. It's because we're actually working on that now.
Oh, yeah.
And what we want to be able to do is literally go to your Boxel application, describe the product you want. I want a tool that will help me keep track of students who are like, scheduling for tests, and I want to give them time to pick a time, and then when it's expired or it's full, tell them you have to use a second time. It's a pretty complicated application, kind of like guest list, kind of like a test taking list or something like that. And we want to get to a point where you could just describe that in English, and then when you click a button, it will just generate that, and you can start using it. And these are the training that we're doing right now by way of building it by hand to help the AI understand what is the correct way of doing things. And then as it understands more and more how to work with Boxel, it can generate that. But remember, the reason why it can actually just do such a good job is because underlying the language we use in TypeScript, AI knows a lot about. There's a lot of open source code with JavaScript and TypeScript, and it learned from that. And it's, as well as the Ember stuff, there's a lot of example code. And all it has to learn is like the quirkiness of Boxel, and then it can actually generate fully working code that we just basically, with maybe 2-line change, copy and pasted it.
Let me ask you a question about the quality of the AI, Chris. So we were using today a custom ChatGPT on OpenAI's website. Now, we all know that OpenAI is the leader right now, right, in terms of the quality of AI. What makes us think that we're going to be able to have the same kind of quality if we embed something inside of, on the Boxel website?
Well, the good thing about OpenAI as a company is that it actually started as an API company. Before they built ChatGPT, which is the kind of like cultural zeitgeist where people get an account and they do it on their website on openai.com, right? But there's an API that we can use that has most of the capability that allows us to write a specialized UI that's deeply integrated with Boxel, which we call the Boxel AI Assistant, that uses basically the same skill set that ChatGPT uses, but we use basically the same prompts, which is the like English instruction to help the AI, but we can wire it much more deeper and closer into the way the field definitions are created, the error message is coming back, syntax error, and that if we feed it back to the AI, the same OpenAI backend, but by way of our special bot that we're building, the AI bot, we're able to reduce the need for a developer to really understand both AI and Boxel. If you understand the business domain, our goal is that you can go to Boxel, ask for that. If one exists, we'll pick up one from the catalog and say, do you mean this one? If one doesn't exist, we'll make one for you right there within this operator mode.
So we're going to be able to get the same quality AI that we just saw today, or better as it learns more.
Yes.
But with more integration into the application.
And the better integration led to better outcome and less errors and more immediate update.
Awesome.
You can literally just say, I was missing a field. You say, ask for a field, and just pops up as if you added it on code mode.
Very cool.
Because that's exactly what's happening, right? It's just adding a line of code, and it shows up immediately.
Yeah, good stuff.
Well, Luke, thank you for getting us through another episode.
Yeah.
I think one of the nice things about database-driven application is that this really opens up a great deal of applicability for much more ownable software that you can just like, hey, why do I have to pay that SaaS subscription to do that? But there are also applications that we want to look at that would allow us to build something that is less of like an internal application, maybe making a storefront. So I think that's what we're going to work on next.
Love it.
So we're going to build on these concepts. And as you see, these episodes are for developers to understand what's going on under the hood. But we also want to show the use cases that this framework of card stack and the Boxel product that wraps it all together can really host any of the software. All the software that we have created thus far will just be there on our first day that people can log in, which is a feature we recently added.
Oh yeah, if we're gonna look here in the bottom left, we got this little L down here. And if I click, it actually knows who I am because I'm logged in with my Matrix account here. And we can see I can customize my name if I want to. Save. Now I'm Luke M. So that's the building blocks of more to come in our account management area.
Yeah, and then being able to have an account management thing allow us to open this up to a larger number of users.
Yes.
So we can create accounts, control access, and in some cases, control access to API keys to allow you to play with the AI. And that's one of the reasons we want to kind of show you how you can use all this capability before we make it so that you can go and make your own. Signs for many things to come. If you're interested into seeing and getting notified of the next episode when it drops, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notification. We plan to do it once every week or so, and we have a lot of ideas in mind, some of which will overlap with AI and some of them will overlap with Web3. But the basic capability builds on each other, and hopefully today we show that database applications, master detail view, SaaS application is certainly within the capability. And until next time, take care.
Yep. See you at the wedding.